Welcome to the Dragon's Den podcast. This podcast is mostly about World of Tanks, and that's what we'll really be covering. We'll be covering a lot of news for it, along with different community topics. Now, these will come out every Sunday, and then on every other week, they'll come out on Monday. These will usually last around an hour-ish, so you can just listen to it and relax, of course. Maybe play it in the background while you're playing World of Tanks. And really, this is a podcast to have fun with. So let me introduce myself. My name is Samuel Deckerman, or just Sam, and my username, in case you want to contact me in the game, is sdeckerman, or SDEKHTERMAN. So, if you want to friend me, you can. And I often play around 5-7 days in a week. So yeah. So let's move on. Let me introduce my clan, the Dragons, or as in game you'll see, the Drags. Now, we personally think that we are.
You know me to be a very smart man. Don't you think if I were wrong, I'd know it?
And we consider ourselves a higher clan, not like in a Nazi way, but just in a fun little way where we stick together and, do our thing. And, we often do a lot of reaming, not to brag, but really to brag, because, come on, please join, come on, man, you know you want to do it, or girl, whoever you is, come on, you know me. I mean, you don't really know me, I'm just the guy at the podcast, but come on, you can do it, I believe in you, my friend. And, we have so far just only 7 players. However, we hope to expand along with this podcast, and we have a number of values. For example, community and communication. Now, with communication, we often see that it helps us grow together and be a better team. And because of this, we can often pull off games where we get, 6 kills together. And that is something that is only reserved for higher level play. However, we manage it, and goddamn do we do it well. Oh crud, I swear. Hey, who cares? I'm an atheist. Okay, so let's move on to the first topic of the day. This first topic is about the new Blitz. Now, Blitz is a newer World of Tanks, if you will, for the mobile platform, in case you don't know. And in its commercial, we see that it's very interesting, for the main fact that it's an adult. Sure, it's a white guy, but nonetheless you do get different races. For example, the black lady and yeah, that sort of thing. So basically, when we see it, we see that's quite interesting, mostly because, it shows somewhat realism between the two. However, it's not the first time that we see a commercial showing the game and people it as one. We often see this with FIFA commercials, and most recently with Titanfall. Titanfall is a shooter, in case you don't know. In their commercial, they did the exact same thing, where you had your giant mech following behind you. And with this, it was pretty similar. Except the only difference was that in this commercial, there was someone, showing the iPad. In case you haven't seen it, I'll put a link to it down below. Now, there were a couple of things that I did like about that game. First and foremost is how easy it was to control with the movement. There were arrows that show you where to go. However, they weren't very long. But that only has to say,
how dare you shoot a nice lady!
Because, even though it has a lot of criticism, it is still very effective. However, we see that, it's easy to change the things in case you are having trouble with the options, as you can with the PC game and as you can with the game on the 360. Now, graphics are really good for this game, in the main fact that its graphics are just amazing, stunning if you will. Now, we can see this through many games, however, that graphics aren't everything, so that's not something, to always look forward to. However, a thing that kind of worries me about this game is the platform itself. Will it just be on iPad? Because, on iPad you have a lot of space, but, it is a bit more spacious. So that can be very much a difficult thing. However, if it just stays to the iPad, I can see it being a very interesting new way to play it on the go. However, there are a few things that I am scared of. Not like spiders or my mom yelling at me, but things that might ruin this game or make it not sell well, which could definitely hurt the developers. First, we see that it just might not work on the system. Now, according to Extra Credits, a show for game developers or someone who wants to see the process, it shows that often games like shooters don't convert very well because they're not supposed to be on a platform which doesn't support them. However, with strategy games, they transfer well because they often incorporate things from the computer games which just translate naturally to it. So it'll be interesting to see if this game also does the same. We have to keep in mind, however, these developers do have a bit of experience with making things easy for the players. However, only time will tell what will happen to it. Next, we see that balancing might be off, mostly because it is a newer game. Some new games can naturally be pretty well balanced. However, with this one, it just came out, so there of course are going to be changes that need to be made. And for newer players, I don't think this will be too much of an issue, mostly because since the game came out, it'll be more difficult to get to that maximum amount in the skill trees. For the controls, we see that there's not very much for experienced players. With these experienced players, they're used to this certain button layout, and even if they change it, they're definitely still going to have trouble. However, going against that, we still see that the expertise of the developers will definitely help out in the end. We have to also look to sales, which could be a major issue. Now, if this doesn't sell well enough, then these developers could lose a lot of money, especially with the mobile gaming market wavering so often. Just remember how very few months ago, Flappy Bird was at an all-time high, and then it just disappeared. Despite this, we see that the fans may be able to help it. Next, let's move on to how few classes there are. Now, let's just say you do have a mobile device. This could really open you up to, different types of play in those higher skill trees, given you have your normal light tanks at the bottom, but still, different classes are taken away towards the top, giving you only 3 different tanks to choose from. Nonetheless, this is a gaming, this is a game where these things aren't as important, seeing as how very few players will go to pro levels with this. However, these few tanks may often turn off players who are older and have a bit more experience with the game. Nonetheless, its major platform is, of course, on the PC and then the 360 or the Xbox One. Now let's move on to the 9.1 update. Personally, I'm a big fan of it, where these developers have changed the game slightly to balance it out a bit more. They haven't added any tanks, however they have done some things with bushes, which allow, of course, the maps to be more balanced, and even though this may not affect, lower level players, it will definitely affect those pro players who have more experience with the maps and will have to somewhat relearn them. Mostly because this balancing, it will definitely hurt a few players who are used to taking advantage of these maps. There was even a new map added, which will be a lot of fun to get used to. Next, let's move on to the headset. Now this headset is quite interesting, mostly because it's pretty expensive. Like, normally, $90 is not that much. But here's the thing about it. For many places, for example the United States, these things are just so expensive, which will make people want to say
Goodbye.
which shows, these high prices may hurt them. Nonetheless, it'll be something very interesting for people who like Vandy items. So, they can have their thing and talk to their friends. Next, let's move on to the Clan of the Month. Now, this Clan of the Month will end today as of this podcast, and I think it's great, mostly because it inspires new communities to be forged, and because of this, players don't have to be so isolated. Sure, they can choose to stay isolated, but nonetheless, it allows players to communicate and be better together, which is something that's so amazing about these clans. Now, we have to also mention the Earn Your Stripes. This Earn Your Stripes helps people wanting to obtain higher level tanks to make it a lot easier. This has great price reductions, which can show to be invaluable for the short amount of time. In fact, it's helped me get my first level or tier 5 tank, and for me, that's just something I'm so happy about. Otherwise, I would have had to spend so much money and coin. But now, I don't have to. Next, let's move on to the I-7. Now, with this I-7 challenge, it allows you to take a certain tank and then add your own skill or play style. With this, it allows you to get the Churchill 3, which is a very interesting tank for those players who like the Churchill line. This Churchill has a lot of improvements, and it'll definitely be helpful for higher level play. And it'll be interesting to see how it levels the playing field, if at all. At least, I'm sure we'll see it at higher levels of play. Next, let's move on to soccer, or as you European listeners will know, football. The football event is something that's quite interesting, mostly because it's a fun little mini game for people who aren't as hardcore about it, but in some higher levels for soccer or football, we see that it's catching a lot of steam, mostly because of how unique it is, and how it's a different change of pace, if you will. This change of pace is very helpful, especially for older players who have been playing for a while and are kind of getting used to the game. It'll really mix things up. I know personally it's been greatly helping me with finding my own strategies for taking out the enemy's tires and making sure that my goals are reached in the game. Lastly, let's move on to a bit of community. In this bit, we see that the World of Tank Guru is an amazing community resource, mostly because of his many posts and somewhat of a database that he has, with his expertise posted. Because of this, we see great improvements in our community, and as a whole, we all improve. So make sure to check out the Guru, and all the images and sound bits that I have used are not mine, so please don't sue me. Anyway, thank you for listening, and have a nice day.